Quick disclaimer, this video that you are about to watch was written and recorded before the announcement that Sony is now requiring Steam users to make a PSN account to play Helldivers 2, and that they will literally brick your game if you don't want to do that, or if you live in a country where PSN is not supported. And since this video you're about to watch was made before that announcement, I want to make it clear that this is not an endorsement of the current state of Helldivers 2. This video is meant to make fun of the PlayStation fanboys still trying to argue that PC gamers don't buy games, and Helldivers 2 was simply the poorly timed example that I used throughout the video. That said, I encourage you not to buy Helldivers 2 on PC if you haven't already until this decision is reversed, or at the very least, account linking is made optional. Locking existing players out of this game for not wanting a PlayStation account is nonsense, and literally bricking the game for players who don't even have access to PSN in their country is even more nonsense. Fragmenting this game's community just so Sony can pad their PSN stats is the most brain-dead thing I've seen in gaming all year. So let's have a chuckle together and let's laugh at some weird PlayStation fanboys, but just know going into this video that this is not an endorsement of the current state of Sony's handling of Helldivers 2. 1, 2, 3, go. I've made a handful of videos about the inherent comedy that comes from PlayStation fanboys crying and screaming about Sony putting first-party games on the PC, and all the people proclaiming that this is career suicide for the PlayStation brand because PC gamers are all just a bunch of filthy pirates who don't actually buy games. But then Helldivers 2 comes along and the PC community is actually buying it and playing it more than the PlayStation community. If you don't think that's just inherently funny, you probably think The Big Bang Theory is still peak comedy. Which, by the way, did you know that there was not only a Big Bang Theory spin-off about young Sheldon, but the spin-off is getting a spin-off? Who is watching this? But aside from the fact that Helldivers 2 reportedly sold close to 60% of its copies on the PC, at least in the first month or so, and aside from the fact that Helldivers 2 has consistently held a higher spot on the Steam top sellers charts than the PlayStation top sellers charts, there are still a bunch of PlayStation fanboys insisting that PC gamers are the worst people to ever exist, and they're gonna bring the downfall of Sony with their devious tactic of checks notes, giving Sony lots of money. And that brings us to today's main event. So the other day, a viewer of the channel sent me a Twitter minefield that they had seemingly set on accident because of a post they made about the current player counts of Helldivers 2 on the PC versus the PlayStation, where a whole bunch of PlayStation fans ended up jumping in and trying to attack him for posting literal numbers on Twitter. And the fact we're still doing all of this almost 3 months after the launch of Helldivers 2 is just hysterical to me. Like, give it up, you lost. But first, the context. This all started when Push Square posted a report that Stellar Blade is, quote, a bestseller in the UK following its launch, which I just think is a funny headline because it's so hand-wavy. Like, read the headline again. It's a bestseller. It doesn't say the bestseller, it just says it's a bestseller. But then when you click on the article, it says Stellar Blade was the best-selling physical game in the time period in question in the UK. So, I don't really get why you wrote your headline in such a wishy-washy manner, but I guess that's just Push Square for you. Anyways, Tripster quote tweeted the news and said, "This is why PC Day and Date will never happen." Because apparently being the best-selling physical game in one specific region is all the evidence you need to completely dismiss the gigantic throbbing cock of Helldivers 2 on Steam, but we'll get into that in a second. Then enter our good old friend of the channel, Totally Not Retro, who quote tweets Tripster with a news article reminding everyone that Helldivers 2 sold the majority of its day and date copies on the PC, along with a clown emoji because Tripster is indeed a member of the professional comedy industry. But then he gets a zinger of a response from Ronaldo saying, "And PC gamers already abandoned it," which, is wrong. Retro responds with a nice quote tweet showing that Helldivers 2 actually has a 2-to-1 PC to PS5 player ratio right now, as evidenced by the fact that Helldivers' in-game player count was at 151,000, while the Steam charts were at 100,000 players. And this, dear viewer, was the proverbial bat signal that was seen by over 150,000 people and got some of the saltiest PlayStation fanboy responses I've seen in quite some time. So come along with me, dear viewer, remember as we wade our way through a bunch of PlayStation fanboys still trying to downplay the number of people playing PlayStation games on the PC and giving Sony money. Because remember, if PlayStation gamers support Sony-funded games, that's a good thing. But if PC gamers support Sony-funded game, that's a bad thing. Because ? Mad Havoc says, you mentioning one Sony game that is a multiplayer, funny that the best single-player Sony game on Steam had a peak of about 80k, skull emoji. Care to give your opinion on that? Why didn't they support those games? Yeah, surely that wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that Sony's single-player PC ports are released way after the hype train is over. Also, concurrent player counts are a really stupid way to analyze the success of a single-player game because, you know, people playing single-player games don't share servers or exist off a community. Single-player games have a beginning, middle, and end. Multiplayer games do not. I can list 5 million single-player games that sold excellently on the PC, and yet they don't have high player counts. Because concurrent players don't fucking matter to whether or not a single-player game was successful. To use Sony examples, according to a leak from last year, Horizon Zero Dawn sold over 3 million copies on the PC, and yet it only peaked at 40,000 concurrent players, and there are only 5,000 people playing it at the time that I'm making this video. Does that mean it wasn't successful? That same leak also revealed that God of War sold over 2.5 million copies on Steam, and yet that game only has 1,000 people playing it right now. Does that mean that those 2 million plus copies just weren't sold? Because those 2 million people aren't always playing this game with a beginning, middle, and end? Of course not. Concurrent player counts don't mean shit to the success of a single-player game because single-player games have objective endings most of the time. Live service games, by design, do not. But also, look at this tweet again. With all the context I just laid out, look at this tweet again. You're talking like 80,000 concurrent players for a single-player game is bad. You even put the stupid skull emoji after the number 80,000. But do you even understand how many fucking concurrent players that is? 80,000 concurrent players would put a game in the Steam top 10 right now. And you're acting like that's a bad thing for a single player game. You're acting like it's not an achievement that a multi-year-old Sony single player game managed to hit numbers that would get it in the Steam top 10. This is your evidence for PC players not supporting PlayStation games on PC. Wow. Web DJ says live service game versus single player, totally a bitch, has no brain cells, skull emoji. Why do you guys use the skull emoji? Like, just little tip here. If you're going to dunk on someone and totally destroy their points, those points should be able to speak for themselves and proclaim them to be amazing, like killer points on your own, and then they're not. You just make yourself look worse. And I'm not going to repeat everything that I just said, because that would take a long time. So I'll just throw this on screen. You can throw tomatoes at it, and we'll move on. Jack Flash says Steam has 132 million users. PS5 has 50 million users. So you agree that it would benefit Sony to put all of their games on the platform with more users? Just remember to keep this energy next time they announce a PC port. Also, if you think PS5 has 50 million users because they've sold 50 million consoles or shipped 50 million consoles, that's not how this works. That's not how this has ever worked. Every single console sold is not active today. How many of those consoles broke? How many of those consoles are just paperweights now? How many of those consoles were bought by scalpers and then never sold because they couldn't turn it around for a profit? Units sold on a console is not equal to active users. That's dumb. That's literally never been how this works. Honest Gamer says, yet it benefits Sony and PlayStation, not PC. PC just helps pay the bills. More games for PlayStation thanks to PC gamers. Fantastic ratio, by the way. Just terrific ratio. But just to be clear, you don't think it benefits the PC to have access to more games on the PC. You don't think that's a benefit to the PC as a platform to have more games. It benefits Sony, for sure, yeah, because Sony makes money. But if you don't think PC players benefit from having more games on their platform, what do you think a gaming platform is? Marco L says, if 40% of sales are on the PS5, it cannot be that for every 1 player on PS5, there are 2 on PC. Go back to school, mate. This is the post you're responding to. Nobody was talking about the 40% sales. They were talking about active users, of which there are numbers on the screen in front of you of the active users. The fact you're even bringing school into this discussion is a little bit of an issue. Perhaps people on the PC are just playing the game for more time, and they're sticking with it for a longer period of time. Like, you can justify this all you want, but just because there was a 40-60 split during the launch window of sales on PC versus PS5 or PS5 versus PC, whatever order, that doesn't mean that the ratio of active users per platform will never change. Like, what is this? Solid Justice says, no, there isn't. The devs said themselves that it sold almost 60% on PC. That is not double. Again, you're responding to this, where there's literally numbers. PC, at the time that these screenshots were taken, the screenshots that you are choosing to respond to, the PC version had twice as many players. We weren't talking about the 60% sales. Also, like I said to the other doofus, even if we were talking about the 60% sales in this very moment, you would still not be correct. Because just because it sold 60% on PC doesn't mean that the percentage of the active community is capped at 60% forever. That's stupid. This one's fun. Name cannot be blank says, so do 100 times more people play Starfield on Xbox because there's only 3,000 players on it on Steam? No one was talking about Xbox. No one was talking about Starfield. I don't know where you're getting 100 times from, but then you click on this guy's profile and he spends his days retweeting Red Dragon and Unleashed. So not surprising that you're still obsessing over Starfield all these months later. Like, you just cannot wrap your head around the fact that maybe PC players are buying the game more than PlayStation players and playing the game more than PlayStation players. You can't wrap your head around that. You look at that and then you're like, yeah, but what about Starfield? Like, motherfucker, no one was talking about that. The fuck's wrong with you? If you're gonna try and redirect the conversation to something that favors you a little more, you might want to redirect the conversation to something that actually makes fucking sense. This is because we are playing Stellar Blade or Rise of the Ronin. Because no games have come out on PC since Helldivers came out. There's no other popular games on PC. Like, oh, PC guys are supporting the PlayStation game 2-1. Well, that's because we have 2 other games on PlayStation. We have like 1 million other games on PC. What is this argument? And on one hand, I get what you're saying. There's less games on the PlayStation, and so when 2 big games come out, Stellar Blade and Rise of the Ronin, it's gonna take a pretty big chunk of the percentage of the people who would be playing Helldivers away from it, because you just don't have that many games to play. But in this context, this is not a good argument. You are arguing in favor of more PC ports. Do you realize that? PC gets 5 bajillion new games a year. PlayStation gets like a handful, but the breakdown is so jank that when a handful of games come out on the PlayStation, according to you, a bunch of the Helldivers player base rushes off to play that, while the PC community is still supporting Helldivers 2 in droves. Except maybe they won't be after the news. Yikes. You're arguing in favor of PC as a long-term platform, and you don't get that. A bunch of the PlayStation guys are like, oh, live service can go to PC on day and date because that's fine, but single-player games can't go to PC day and date because that would hurt sales or something. But then the other PlayStation guys are like, well, some single-player games came out, so obviously the PlayStation guys stopped supporting the live service game. Oh, so maybe your argument doesn't actually make sense? If you are easily distracted away from the PlayStation Live Service game by a single-player game, while the PC community is still supporting the live service game in the face of dozens and dozens and dozens of new games and available games on their platform, your argument for single-player games not going day and date to PC doesn't really work anymore, does it? Okay, that part was worded a little poorly, so let me just really spell this out so we're all on the same page. If your argument for PlayStation games not going to PC day and date, if your argument against that is that PC players won't support the game, then it's a little strange for you to then just openly say that PlayStation gamers have lowered their support for the PlayStation Live Service game because a couple other games came out. Because all the while, there are way more games coming out and way more games competing for your attention on the PC, and yet in the face of that, the PC community is not only buying more copies of Helldivers 2, but they're also holding a much larger percentage of the long-term player base. Do you understand now why this argument is actually a really bad one? QuinnQQ says, thanks for funding more Day 1 exclusive PlayStation games. Retro responds, no problem, thanks for beta testing the games. QuinnQQ says, no problem, Day 1 PlayStation games are amazing, you're too poor to purchase games Day 1. So, PC gamers are too poor to purchase games Day 1, even though they out-purchased you guys Day 1 on Helldivers and are continuing to outpurchase you on Helldivers. Also, I love when PlayStation guys are like, PC gamers are too poor, but then if you tell them to go get a PC, they're like, it's too expensive. PC gaming is too expensive, but also PC gamers are too poor to buy games. Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. I love that one. That one makes sense. PC gamers are just too poor to buy games. That's why our hardware is more expensive than yours and we buy it. Wait, one more. Straight Coasting Gaming says, lol on one game, so how much did Horizon Forbidden West sell compared to PS5? Did God of War sell more on PC than PS5? Or how about Ratchet and Clank? PC version sell more? You guys are missing the point. You guys are so dramatically missing the point, and I guess I'll turn this into my outro because that's the last screenshot that I have. But when presented with the opportunity to buy a PlayStation game day and date, PC gamers did it more than you. When presented with the opportunity to buy PlayStation games way after release, a lot of PC gamers still do it. Like millions of copies sold on multi-year-old games at full price on the PC. What do you think will happen when those games go day and date? What do you think is going to happen when the big first-party PlayStation hype train includes the PC community? The same PC community that outbought Helldivers 2 compared to the PlayStation community that constantly holds up first-party games on a fucking pedestal. For really no reason, because it's not like these games are all incredible. Listen, PC gamers buy games. Day and date for PlayStation games is coming. And if you're a PlayStation fan, I would think you want this because we're going to give you a bunch of fucking money. God, like you PlayStation dudes, you could just embrace this. You could just be like, oh, cool, more games for us. Or like, oh, cool, more funding for us. Or like, oh, cool, I now have an option for my hardware that I buy these games on. But you don't care about the games. You just care about the hardware. You care about the console, and that's it. That's where your care stops. You either buy it on PlayStation or you don't buy it at all, and then you act like you actually like these games. But like, newsflash, if you weren't going to buy this game if it was on different hardware, I don't think you actually like these games. Like, God, you people are weird. Okay, toodles.